There being 9 ayes and 48 noes, I declare the result in the negative. I call the minister. Oh, sorry. The question is that the bills now be read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Clerk.
A bill for an act to amend the law relating to civil aviation and for related purposes. Now come to me. Come down to me.
Is it the wish of the committee that the bill be taken as a whole? There being no objection, it is so ordered. The question is, Senator Rice.
Thanks, Deputy President. Look, I'm extremely disappointed that, given the questions about this bill, which are legitimate, about watering down and undermining the role of CASA as a safety regulator, didn't get sent to committee. I think there are many unanswered questions that should have been sent to committee. So, look, I heard during the second reading debate both Senator Fawcett and Senator Patrick talking about getting rid of basically unnecessary bureaucratic requirements that CASA, they allege, was imposing upon aviation, that in fact didn't have anything to do with safety. So I wanted to ask the minister how you can assure me that in fact safety isn't being watered down. It may well be that the intent of these changes are to deal with bureaucratic, unnecessary requirements that add to the cost of aviation, but these changes allow for far more than this. These changes allow for basically safety to be undermined, to be traded off, to be reduced. So, Minister, can you tell me, give me some assurance that that in fact is not going to be the case?
Minister.
Thank you. Yes, I can. Safety remains the primary consideration for CASA, and this bill does not change that. So the bill is not intended to and would not in any way impede CASA's ability to make operational decisions relating to safety. The bill relates solely to CASA's work in developing and promulgating standards and not to individual decisions or directions. As mentioned earlier, decisions in relation to the decision to stop flights of Boeing 737 MAX 8 aircraft on safety grounds, those type of decisions would in no way be impacted. Subsection 9A1 of the Civil Aviation Act instructs that in exercising its powers and performing its functions, CASA must regard the safety of air navigation as the most important consideration. Subject to section 9A1, the bill proposes that in developing and promulgating aviation safety standards, CASA must consider the economic and cost impacts on individuals, business and the community of such standards, and take into account the differing risks associated with differing industry sectors. And I think that was something well articulated during the debate about the need to take these things into account. But the short answer to your question is there is no watering down of CASA's primary objective, which is to keep Australians safe in the air.
Senator Rice.
I hear that, but basically by saying it's the primary, the most important, still doesn't mean that by putting in these economic and social considerations you're actually weighing these things off against each other. And as I said, I understand that the intent was to get rid of unnecessary costs that in fact weren't helping with safety. But my reading of this bill is that it goes far further than that. And it's not just my reading. I mean, the pilots that have written to us, they are concerned. The quote that I read out from the Pilots Association, where the danger to the public safety interest comes from a safety regulator that gets role confused and starts to act like an economic regulator. I mean, this is the sort of things that I think needed to be considered in an inquiry into this bill, because there are different interpretations of what's being proposed here. And by adding in these social and economic costs, it does not seem that, I mean, it may have the best of intentions to not be impacting on safety, but I cannot see. It is no way of reading it other than to know that the primacy of safety as the thing that CASA is concerned about is being impacted. Now, I think the community safety, the community service flights that Senator Patrick talked about were in fact a good case study of how the regime should work. If there was a sense that by putting safety as the primary consideration, that wasn't, there needed to be other factors that were taken into account, well then it is appropriate for the parliament to then be disallowing the regulation, for us as a parliament to make that judgment, rather than the safety regulator making that judgment. So look, deeply disappointed. I think there's probably nothing more that you're going to be able to tell me that's going to set my heart at rest that we are not undermining the safety standards of our Civil Aviation Safety Safety Agency. Jacqui.
Senator Lambie.
Madam Deputy President, I seek the leave to move amendments 1 and 2 on sheet 8699 together.
Is leave granted? Leave's granted.
These amendments change the language in Section 9A of the Civil Aviation Act, which states that CASA must regard the safety of air navigation as the most important consideration. Everybody wants a safe aviation sector, but we want to see an aviation sector that is sustainable as well as safe. When it comes to aviation safety, the safest passenger is the one that never gets in a plane in the first place. The easiest way to prevent aviation accidents is to shut down aviation altogether. If every plane is grounded, every plane is safe. And excessive regulation is doing just that, keeping planes safe by keeping planes grounded. This is all made possible by the rules around the regulator CASA, which currently has to consider safety as the highest priority above all else. It is required to ignore other considerations like cost, as if it is unrelated. Putting one pilot in the cockpit isn't as safe as having 2 pilots in there instead, and having 2 pilots isn't as safe as having 10 or 12 or 20. But which airline could afford to fill half its seats with pilots on the payroll? Sure, you would be safer, but your ticket would be so expensive that nobody would be able to afford it. The reality is that proposals to make aviation safer—
Senator Lambie, it being 6:30 p.m, the Senate is suspended until 7:30 p.m.